Hello, Graham here from Arion Games again, and in this video I wanted to talk about the Maelstrom Domesday Campaign. So this was the subject of a Kickstarter earlier this year. It was quite a long Kickstarter, fairly low key, went on for 2 months, roared past its target, which was set deliberately quite low. And this, in a way, was inspired by the Great Pendragon campaign. Now, you will almost certainly have heard of it, you may well have played it, you may well have run it. And the Great Pendragon campaign is, rightly, one of the great role playing campaigns that have been published. And it covers the full Arthurian story from the times of King Arthur's father, Uther, up until the tragic end of the story. And the idea is that you start off with a knight who, at the beginning of Pendragon, is pretty much a post Roman Celt. And things rapidly advance through each period of the story, so it then becomes effectively Normans, and then it becomes early medieval, and then late medieval, and so on. So you might well start wearing leather and some chain and using a sword and have long hair and a beard. And by the time you get to your grandson's period, everyone's following the rules of courtly love. You've got formal gardens laid out, and knights are wearing Gothic plate, jousting, and so on. And so in Pendragon, the technology moves on at a very, very rapid rate. Every phase takes a big jump in history. Now, I've played through quite a lot of the Pendragon campaign. It is a fantastic book, but I wanted to do something that approached us, that approached that sort of idea, but from Doomsday angle. So in Maelstrom Doomsday, one of the key parts of character creation is the randomness, the random life path. And I know I've spoken to people who said, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't like that," but that's fine. Everyone has their own preferences. But the random life path character creation in Doomsday gives you a person. It does give you a character in terms of the stats and abilities and equipment and everything else, but it gives you a person. They've got a history, they've got likes and dislikes, they've got fears, they've got loves, they might have children, they might have marriages, but it's random. And people don't like that because very often, especially these days, people want to play a character that they've designed. And that's great, that's good. But in Doomsday, you get given by fate this person. Much like in the real world, you are given your fate. So all of us in the real world have no idea what fate has in store for us. When we're a child, when we're a teenager, we think this is how I want my life to go. It very often doesn't. We have bad times, we have good times, and everything is mixed up. And that is what Doomsday is there to emulate. So I once rolled up a character just to see what I got, where of his six periods of his life, his 6 terms, he was fined by the Manor Court for drunkenness twice. He fell in love with someone who then ran away with someone else. And then he also fell in love with someone and they died. Then he broke a leg in another event, and I think a final event was his house burnt down, something like that. So this character, I got to the end of character creation and thought, you have had a truly awful life up until this point. But in a way, that is the point, because this character is then moving on. And when you start the game, it doesn't matter if you're not great at fighting. It doesn't matter if you're not great at X, Y, or Z. What does matter is who you are as a character. And that's really, really important. But also, a big part of that is age. So this was written into the original Doomsday rules, where age is important. It could be you've done 6 full livings, say as a knight. Now, each of those livings is 5 years long. So that's 30 years. So you are 44 at the start of the game, which is quite old. You've already experienced some aging, but you've got really, really good stats. You've probably got money, you've probably got a horse, you've got armour, you've got social standing. Great. Equally, you could be a peasant of 17 at the start of the game. Very little in the way of skills, equipment, money, your stats are much lower, but you're only 17. You've got many years till you start to lose any stats from aging. Now, if you're playing this as a one-off, the knight is much better off. If you play this as a campaign, it starts to come into its own. So the Domesday Campaign sort of arose from both the Pendragon Campaign and the idea of the ageing. So the Domesday Campaign starts in 1086, which is the core book start date. So it's 20 years after the Norman Conquest, and it is 6-7 years after the Harrowing of the North, where William the Conqueror committed genocide across the north of England. So it's a turbulent time, and it takes place in the Richmond area, and that's Richmond, North Yorkshire, by the way. There are several Richmonds. Richmond means effectively strong hill, and in Norman French, and there is a very big, strong, rocky hill in Richmond, North Yorkshire, with one of the earliest stone castles in the UK built upon it. Now, I put it here because I live fairly close. I'm a 20-minute drive from Richmond. I've been to Richmond Castle quite a few times. If I look out my window that way, I can see a later castle. We have historic ruins all around us. We have a Templar preceptory just a little bit that way, about a mile up the hill. So I want to set it somewhere I knew for various reasons, but it starts in 1086 and it follows the history through until the late 1100s, 1189 I think it is. And here age now plays a big role, because if you start as a 17-year-old, you might not have much in the way of experience, skills, equipment, but you've got room to grow, you've got room to become better. The knight who starts at 44 is already some way down that slippery slope to becoming old and decrepit. And 44 is, of course, old and decrepit, and I'm a few years older than that, and I know that too well. But the knight is going to struggle to get any better. They're going to get worse and worse and worse over the years. That's not to say they won't be an effective character for some years to come, but 10 years maybe maximum before they lose all their effectiveness. Whereas the 17-year-old peasant, in 10 years' time, he's still 5 years off experiencing any of the effect of ageing. 20 years' time, he's still had almost no effects of ageing, and he's grown a lot more. By this time, the knight has either retired or died. And so what happens is, when a group creates a set of characters of varying ages, some will retire before others, some will start good, and then they will get old, they will retire, and they will be replaced by a much younger character. And that much younger character won't be so great, and then they will have to get better over the years. And so you will have all of these overlapping characters with different ages going through the 103 years of the campaign. And this gives a specific dynamic to the campaign, because you are playing a character, but you know for a fact that the character you start with will not be there at the end. Even if you start at the youngest age that you could do, which I think is about 16, you would end up being nearly 120 at the end of the campaign. That's not going to happen. So you are going to have children, and there are mechanical benefits written into this campaign for you to follow on as the son or daughter of your pre-existing character. But even then, you're not going to finish the campaign as the son of your starting character, possibly even as the grandson or granddaughter. It may well be the great-grandson, great-granddaughter. So what you then have is you have something akin to some of the epic novels you see, which follows a family across the generations. So you start in the aftermath of the Norman Conquest, and you end just as Richard the Lionheart seriously starts thinking about crusades. Okay, so you've got this arc of history, and yes, my next planned book, big book for the Domesday line, is indeed a crusades campaign with all of the warts that entails. So I'm going to finish now, but I am going to talk about this again in the next video. This video is really about the the reasons behind it, the feel of the campaign, the dynamic of the campaign. In the next one, I want to talk a little bit about what it actually entails, what's in the book. At the moment, this is my working copy. This actually only goes up to 1100, this one. And in terms of the writing, I'm well into the 1130s, so I've got quite a few pages to print and add to that working copy. But book one of that, covering the first 50 or so years, should be done within the next month or so. There's also a book about running a manor, there's a book about the local district, and then I've got to get on with book two, covering the next 50 years or so, which will run all the way up to 1189 and should be done by the end of the year. So until next time, when I'll talk a little bit more about this campaign, thank you for listening and happy gaming.